and that's what came up.
Fair enough. All right. Let's start here, Kyle. Malik Monk, right? So there are players that have been talked about a lot, right? Obviously, Domantas Sabonis have been talked about a ton. Domantas Sabonis, DeMar DeRozan, of course, Zach LaVine, and Sam Amick is doing a great job with that. So I kind of wanted to approach this and look at some of the other names that haven't been talked about as much. So I want to start with Malik Monk because it is a situation that we kind of knew was coming, and I'll give you a little preview of my write-up. The market for Malik Monk is starting to heat up, even with the 3 years on his contract, because the belief is there's always a team looking for a high-energy six-man scorer. Though, with some players on the Kings ready to pack their bags, Monk has said from day one he wanted to be in Sacramento, and he's technically the only vet that, quote-unquote, chose to stay. Teams like the Raptors, who have had interest in Monk for years, may look to rekindle that interest, but he could also be one of the vets that gets to play through the larger scale changes as a fan favorite. So I look around, and a lot of the teams that we keep hearing for all these guys, honestly, outside of DeMar DeRozan, they're Eastern Conference teams, right? So there's a reason for that. A lot of these teams do feel like it's a bit more wide open, and they could be a Dennis Schroder away, a Malik Monk away. And I bring up the Raptors because they are a team that started out hot, and people were, a bit surprised in how they've been playing. Cooled off a bit, Kyle. They've lost 4 in a row, to be completely honest with you. They are 5-5 4-6 their last 10 games. And we had on a couple writers during the summer as we discussed the RJ Barrett conversation and how RJ Barrett, there's obviously a connection there with Scott Perry and his time on the Knicks. Now, RJ Barrett has been out, right? But there could be a world where the Raptors, they're basically saying we have our own version of a logjam. Like, if you ask, we know that the Raptors, their Scotty Barnes is somebody else's Keegan Murray, is somebody else's Jalen Johnson. That's their guy of the future. Now, when you're trying to put players around Scotty Barnes, that kind of leaves, funny enough, RJ Barrett in the situation of the Trae Youngs and guys like that, where you're just kind of on the outside looking in, and we've already decided to go with our guy that's your age is Brandon Ingram. Right, we've gone in that direction. So could there be some interest there where they say, "Hey, we need less, right? We need to pay somebody less, and that's Malik Monk, and we need somebody who's just going to come off the bench and kind of do their thing." I know we've talked about Grady Dick kind of being that person, and Emmanuel Quickley, who apparently does play basketball, just not when I watch the Raptors guys there, Kyle. So you look at a RJ Barrett on a 2-year plan, so you'd lose one of the years of Malik Monk. You got him for 3 years right now, but RJ Barrett at $27.7 million, Malik Monk at $18.7. Obviously, that money right there doesn't directly work, so the Kings would have to toss in something else to get that closer.
Dario Saric.
But there is a situation, which is why they held on to Dario Saric. Now's the time, Dario. The time is now, brother. The time is now at your $5.4 million.
Your time is ticking.
Yeah, so that's a potential suitor for Malik Monk, and I believe that could work. Like I said, there has been a level of interest in Malik Monk out there in the 6 in Toronto for years now, dating back to his time in Charlotte, and then it didn't happen. He goes to L.A.
6.
And then he makes his way to Sacramento. Just seems like it might make more sense than when RJ Barrett does return. All right, cool. We know Scotty is our number one. Now we have Brandon Ingram and RJ, just a smidge redundant in what their roles would be out there in Toronto. And again, it's just something that they might end up doing anyway. I know RJ Barrett's a couple years younger, so it's an opportunity for the Kings to get a little bit younger. It's less of a eyebrow raiser when it comes to, hey, I thought the Kings we're going to blow it up and they were going to stink. This doesn't really change the the timeline. If anything, it shortens it because RJ Barrett is only on contract for 2 more years. So the Malik Monk conversation, I think, is going to heat up. This is a situation where, as we're about to lead into Dennis Schroder, it's a situation where Malik Monk may be starting to kick off this stage of his career where he might start collecting some jerseys, right? A guy, you look at Jordan Clarkson. Jordan Clarkson is going through it now. He had his time in Utah where they were trying to figure out, hey, are you a starter in this league? And he put up some numbers, but between him and Colin Sexton, they funny enough, it almost seemed like a Kings thing where they got 2 guys that are both better as 6 men and thought maybe 2 6 men equals a starter, and it just didn't happen in Utah. So now Clarkson is on the New York Knicks and might end up on a 1-year deal, will probably end up on a different team after that, and so on and so forth. So Malik got his bigger bag, if you will, especially after how things almost went south for him in Charlotte. So this will probably be the next phase of that for Malik. Or like I said, he might be the pizza guy and just the guy that they choose, the Kings choose. Hey, we do have to have vets. It's not going to be a team filled with all rookies, even when we are rebuilding. So Malik is going to be one of the vets. It could be Malik and Sabonis, just 2 guys that we decide they're gonna stay on the team as we kind of rebuild this thing. And Sabonis plays that, and I believe they're on the same timeline. So both of them play out their contracts, and then they'd be off the book. So that's the Malik Monk kind of piece of this.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this trade over the summer when we were talking about clearing out the logjam a little bit, and this was more so you're making a trade because you like different flavors of the same situation, right? RJ Barrett does things a little differently than Malik Monk, maybe brings you a little bit more ball handling ability. Not that Malik is bad, but RJ Barrett's probably a little bit better. Different contracts, which probably is a precursor to other moves. Again, you're just, for a team that's 6-20, you're kind of just getting different flavors of the same problem, essentially. Or not problem, different flavors of the same food.
Yeah, I mean, RJ Barrett is a couple years younger. I think he does have a higher ceiling. So I understand why both sides do it. I don't think it's a earth-shattering move either way, but it is a move that makes the Raptors make more sense. And I don't know that it makes the Kings make more sense, but it at least gives them a younger player with maybe a slightly higher ceiling, even though it would be a sad day for me as Malik Monk. I have to say it every time I talk about Malik Monk, my favorite player on the Sacramento Kings.
And of course, we always have to mention it with RJ Barrett. Scott Perry drafted and extended RJ Barrett while he was with the New York Knicks.
So let's go to the next name on this list. And again, I am reading you my article, my Allen's intel that has not been released yet, but it will be released today. Dennis Schroder. Who better to begin with than with the player who has become the most overused example of the fact that trades can and do happen on December 15th, because that's when he was traded last season, then traded again. Maybe that's why Scott Perry felt comfortable giving Schroder a 3-year contract at $15 million a year, only 2 years guaranteed, because he believed it would be an easy contract to move when that time came. His injury raised some The Rock eyebrows when he was listed as questionable for nearly a month, dropped to doubtful for a couple games before returning to action against Minnesota last night, dropping 17 points and looking very spry. Maybe he thought it might be a tryout for a potential team in the Timberwolves who desperately need a point guard. His market is simple. Who needs a stopgap point guard at a decent price? He will probably come up once teams decide they don't want to spend big bucks, whether that be actual cash or draft capital. So there is what I had kind of jotted down on Dennis Schroder. And again, there are whispers about Dennis Schroder and where this thing is going. If you look at these vets that we continue to talk about, it's very clear where all these guys fit. It's unclear where Dennis Schroder fits. Ever since these guys started losing basketball games very badly over and over again, the question has been, okay, we know it's a commitment with Domantas Sabonis, but at best he can be a top 25 player in this league. We know it's a commitment with Zach LaVine, but he's kind of stuck in the mud with his contract, and now he's injured. If he were playing really well, it might be different. Next season, a lot of things change because he'll be expiring. Then you have the other side of it. DeMar DeRozan, the conversation there, where that's going to go with his, the last couple years of his career, making sure that he gets somewhere, doing the best he can to make sure he gets somewhere to compete. Dennis Schroder, who just got signed, is the one looking around like the Will Smith meme at some point thinking, well, what is my plan, or what are we trying to do? And I don't think Dennis is really tripping because, again, this guy has been collecting jerseys like Thanos Infinity Stones. He's been on multiple teams, and I would assume that he expects this to happen again. As far as who could be interested, I bring up the Minnesota Timberwolves because we've seen them connected to the Chris Pauls of the world. We've seen them connected to the Ja Morants of the world. There is a real thought process that they could split the difference and say, well, I don't think Chris Paul is going to give us enough. I don't know that we want to give up what the Grizzlies are trying to get us to give up for Ja Morant. We could split the difference, pay Dennis Schroder $15 million, get through this season, and again, it's a very tradable contract, and that last season isn't guaranteed. So that's a name that sticks out to me that I would not be surprised at all. I know it's all in the Western Conference, but again, nobody is really worried about trading with the Kings because they're going in the other direction, right? Oh, well, we can't do business with the Timberwolves because, this could burn us. That's more of a thing when it comes to these prospects and young players versus actual vets that are just there to kind of help a situation. We know the money situation is really tough with the Rockets, so probably aren't going to be able to get it done. But the Timberwolves, that's specifically a team that I would keep an eye out for. These teams that are they feel like they're a point guard away, and that's a team that's been very open. And we've had these conversations before about, well, why don't you look in the direction of getting a point guard even prior to the season? That's not what they wanted to do. They thought that Rob Dillingham might make a leap that, funny enough, in a way that Reed Shepherd is kind of making, but it just hasn't worked out. And again, not to make a joke, but you got Bones Highland out there dropping 18. And Bones Highland is probably not dropping 18 on playoff contending teams. He could drop 18 on the Kings, but he's not dropping 18 on some of the teams that the Timberwolves are going to have to face down the line. So that's where this thing kind of falls as far as I'm concerned with Dennis Schroder.
Mike Conley heard you say that. He was like, no, please, don't make me go to Sacramento, please.
Yeah, and then on the other side, he's a vet, right? You need all the vet point guards you can get if you're Sacramento. At least that's how they act. But you can move on from that contract, and Mike Conley could just eventually make a decision.
Yeah, I'm just kind of trying to figure out what the deal would look like, because I guess it works with, like, you throw in Joe Ingles and Bones Highland, and that's the deal. But again, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of wiggle room just because they have so many big contracts. Yeah. So I don't know if the upgrade of Dennis Schroder to Mike Conley is that much of a needle mover for Minnesota, but
come on. I do. Come on now,
Kyle.
I mean,
look, Mike Conley's looking real cooked out there. I'm not going to say he's not, but Minnesota seems to be patchworking this thing fine, and I just don't know if their big move at the deadline being Dennis Schroder is necessarily their best plan, especially because, like, they could just let Conley's contract expire and then they have flexibility, but I also get they're in a we got to win right now championship window. Yeah,
another conversation that came up, there was that guy who was technically, I guess, a Pistons fan or content creator, but when you go to his account, he was a stock trader or something like that. He came out and said that the Pistons had interest in Dennis Schroder. The question was, are you able to boomerang and then trade back somebody that you just had on your team? The question mark was whether or not you could do that. I was speaking with Brendan Nunez about it, and we were trying to figure it out. Apparently you can. All right, we're still kind of workshopping that, but apparently you can. So there is a level of interest with the Pistons trying to run it back, which you said before, Kyle, would be funny because I don't know. You said it would be funny because they didn't want to pay Dennis Schroder that. But how I look at it now is maybe they didn't think anybody would pay Dennis Schroder that. I don't think Dennis Schroder thought anybody was going to pay him that with the Cheshire Cat grin that he had on his face when he came out here in Sacramento and just said, this is a huge commitment. Thank you. Thank you. So I think looking back on it now, the Pistons could say, all right, well, you decided to, somebody did pay him that money. It's not that we don't think you were worth that money. We just didn't think anybody would actually do it. But we are not against paying you that money for a couple years. And then again, that last season isn't guaranteed. So I would expect, again, workshopping the availability and the possibility of trading back for him with the understanding that the Pistons could do it. They could be interested too.
Yeah. Again, there are teams that will take a $14 million a year point guard. Mm-hmm. That's the underlying point there. There are teams that will jump at it, whether it's for, and Minnesota makes sense because if they don't want to pay the price for Ja Morant or one of these big point guards, they could just say, hey, here's a second-round pick, here's Joe Ingles and Bones Highland, who you guys can waive, and we'll just upgrade from Schroeder to Conley. I don't know if they would do that, but it's at least something on the table for Minnesota to just throw in a couple seconds. Or, again, we talked about Keon Ellis. If Keon Ellis, they add him in that deal, maybe they part with Dillingham and the Kings can say, hey, Rob, you want a year to learn under Westbrook and just try and figure this thing out? We'll give you a year to figure this thing out.
Yeah. So, and as I've said that, there are people that, in the Pistons camp do feel like they're a bit vindicated because they didn't want to pay Dennis Schroder that money. So we'll see what happens there. I think the Minnesota kind of note makes a lot more sense. And somebody else that we wanted to bring up, and again, if you're just now joining us, Sam Amick doing a heck of a job with some of the names that we have heard time and time again, the Domantas Sabonis's, the DeMar DeRozans, the Zach LaVine. So I wanted to do some research and get some intel on some of the other players that we haven't heard about as much. And to kind of close it all out, let's go with somebody that actually can't be traded right now, but does not mean that he won't be traded at some point, and that's Keegan Murray. Now, I think there is a belief around league circles that maybe Keegan is slightly overpaid right now, and he's playing out of position as well, playing a 4, and he's playing 39 minutes a night. He's playing the second most minutes in the NBA behind, I believe it's Tyrese Maxey, and he is running the most miles per game on the defensive end in the league right now at over 1 point whatever miles it is. So they're getting their money's worth, right? The Kings are going to get their money's worth. When it comes to Keegan Murray, I look at some of the similar players, right? Don't get hung up on the names here, but I get the vibe of we are about to head in a certain direction, and we think we're gonna give Keegan an opportunity to get that leap, right? Once they clear out Zach LaVine, whether it be this season or next, once they clear out DeMar DeRozan, once they clear out some of these other guys that are taking shots, Keegan Murray is going to get a year or so to see what exactly he can be. Now, with that being said, once this season ends and Keegan is eligible to be moved, there could be a team out there that says, hey, we think that Keegan is slightly overpaid. So you're not going to get the thing about Trey Murphy is Trey Murphy's only making $25 a year. So that's why that price tag is so high, because it's a really good contract. If the league believes that Keegan right now is slightly overpaid, the Kings might get a little less back, but they still could get a decent amount of draft capital moving forward. Or the Kings could say, we are not going to make this move now. We want Keegan to have a Trey Murphy season where we've moved off of, and it could be Zach LaVine, right? It could still be Zach LaVine on the team, but you've moved off of, let's say they've moved off of Malik Monk and DeMar DeRozan heading into 2026, 2027. Keegan would be open for business. Keegan is going to be taking, we assume, would be taking a lot more shots, and they could build up that value there, and they could look at that and say, hey, now Keegan doesn't really look overpaid because Keegan is averaging 18 points a game and his three-point shot is looking great. He's still defending at a high level, but we brought in, I don't know, they could keep Precious Achiuwa, or we brought in another wing to help him defend there. So obviously Keegan can't get moved now. And it's a specific reason why Carmichael Dave, after Jake Fisher came out and said Nick Clifford and Keegan Murray are untouchable, Carmichael Dave immediately went on social media and said nobody is untouchable. And I think the reason is somebody might say at the beginning of next season, here's the deal for Keegan. Do you want to do it now or do you want to continue to build his value? And the Kings could say, you know what? We'll take a couple first rounders for Keegan right now. We don't know that anybody would ever get to, the Desmond Bain or whatever for the Mikal Bridges type of deal. So they would have a decision to make. So even though Keegan can't get moved right now, I still wanted to speak on him because I honestly, Kyle, I'd also say how this trade season would affect how the Kings go into the start of the summer, the start of the offseason. If the Kings move off, let's say they randomly got a deal for Zach LaVine. I don't think it's going to happen, but let's say the Bucks say, yeah, we are going to take a swing on Zach LaVine. Or at the very least, you move on from, because Dennis Schroder takes shots too. Don't get me wrong, even off the bench. So DeMar DeRozan and Dennis Schroder are gone. Let's say at that point, let's say they're gone in January, right? And Keegan gets 3-4 months and he just is on fire, right? That could change his value going into this offseason. So I wanted to bring it up, even though he's not available right now, just to say he's literally safe right now, but how this season ends or how this season progresses could dictate a lot. That was your Allen's Intel for today. We will do this whenever I get some information. I think it's enough to kind of package up for all of you. When we return, we can talk about trades, 916-339-1140. We can also talk about restricted free agency. There is a name that I have completely turned a 180 on, and the Kings have to get him. I'll tell you who it is. He's in the Western Conference. He's 6'8", and he's 24 years old.